The weakest human cadet left the strongest alien warriors shaking. The Crithari warrior hit the floor so hard the whole training deck shook, and for a second nobody in the observation gallery breathed. Milo Drager stood over him, sipping something fizzy out of a pouch, looking about as threatened as a man waiting for a bus. "You good down there, big guy?" he asked. "Blink twice if you need a nap." "Okay. Okay, hold on. That is not where this story starts. That is where it ends, or close enough. Let's rewind, because you deserve the full humiliating build-up before we get to the part where a 200-pound reptilian death machine gets dropped by a guy who still can't do 15 push-ups without complaining about it. The Interstellar Defense Academy did not want humans. Let's be honest about that up front. Humanity got in on what the recruitment officers politely called provisional cultural exchange, and what everyone else called a pity invite. Every other species walking those halls could bench press a shuttle pod, breathe fire, or regenerate a limb before lunch. Humans showed up with squishy skin, bad eyesight, and an alarming tendency to laugh at their own instructors. Milo was, by any measurable standard, the weakest cadet in his entire class. Not the weakest human. The weakest cadet, period, across every species enrolled that cycle. He was skinny, unimpressive, and had the upper body strength of a wet napkin. The Crithari warriors called him the snack. The Voska called him worse, but it didn't translate well into standard, something involving the word gristle. And Milo's response to all of this? Mostly jokes. Constant, relentless, occasionally terrible jokes. His roommate, an insectoid cadet named Zeal, found this deeply confusing. "You were struck in the face today," Zeal said flatly, mandibles clicking as it observed Milo icing a bruise the size of a dinner plate. "Multiple times. By someone twice your mass." "Yep." "You are smiling." "That's just my face, Zeal. It does that sometimes." Zeal's 4 eyes narrowed, which on an insectoid face looked like a math problem nobody wanted to solve. Zeal had been assigned to room with Milo specifically because Command wanted a controlled study on human behavior, which was a polite way of saying nobody else would take him. Living with Milo meant living with strange rituals. He ate something called spicy ramen that made his eyes water and somehow made him happier. He watched recordings of other humans falling off things and got hysterical about it. He referred to catastrophic pain as character building. Zeal began keeping a private log, because Zeal's species valued data, and Milo Drager was, biologically speaking, an anomaly wrapped in a smart remark. The first real test of Milo's non-existent physical prowess came during combat trials, where cadets sparred in graduated matchups. Milo was matched against a Voska cadet named Krun, who stood roughly the size of a small vehicle and had forearms like tree trunks. It did not go well. Krun threw him. Milo got up. Krun threw him again, this time into a wall hard enough to leave a dent that was, generously, Milo-shaped. Milo got up again, wobbling, grinning through a split lip. "Is that all you've got?" Milo asked. "My grandmother hits harder, and she's been dead for 6 years." The observation gallery went dead silent. Nobody knew what to do with that sentence. Krun, visibly rattled by the audacity of a smaller creature mocking him mid-beatdown, hesitated for just a second, and Milo used that second to absolutely not win, because let's be real, he still lost that match badly. But he got up every single time. 14 times. The instructors stopped counting after 10 because it started feeling less like a training exercise and more like watching a horror movie where the monster won't stay down, except Milo was the monster, if the monster made jokes about his own internal bleeding. Commander Vorik Thex watched this entire spectacle from the observation deck with open contempt. Vorik was Crithari, 7 feet of muscle, scar tissue, and disdain, and he had exactly 0 patience for what he considered an embarrassment to the concept of a warrior academy. "This is what your species sent us," Vorik said to no one in particular, arms crossed, staring down at Milo being helped off the mat by medics. A joke. A fragile, mouthy little joke. He decided, right then, that the human needed to be removed from the program before he wasted any more resources. So he did what any reasonable, definitely not petty senior officer would do. He assigned Milo to the Kestrel simulation, a survival exercise built for elite cadets in their final year, designed to break even seasoned warriors through sustained psychological and physical pressure. Everyone assumed this would be the end of Milo Drager's academy career. The simulation dropped him into a hostile environment, alone, with hunter drones programmed to relentlessly pursue and neutralize him using non-lethal but extremely unpleasant methods. Most cadets lasted 20, maybe 30 minutes before tapping out, screaming for extraction, or having what the instructors clinically referred to as a complete confidence collapse. Milo lasted 4 hours. Not because he was strong, not because he was fast, but because he did something almost none of the instructors had accounted for. He never stopped thinking, and he never stopped being obnoxious about it. He rigged a decoy out of scrap metal and his own jacket and gave it a name. He talked to the hunter drones like they could hear him, taunting them, narrating his own survival like a sports commentary nobody asked for. When a drone finally cornered him and blasted him with a stun charge that would have sent most cadets into a screaming heap, Milo hit the ground, twitched, and said, through gritted teeth, "Worth it, 10 out of 10, would get electrocuted again." Back in the control room, the instructors stared at the feed in silence. "He is supposed to be panicking," one of them finally said. "He is," Zeal replied, having been allowed in to observe as part of its ongoing behavioral study. "This is what human panic sounds like." "That's insane." "Yes," Zeal agreed. "I have several pages of notes on it." Word got around the academy fast. Not that Milo had won anything, because he hadn't, not really. What spread instead was the sheer, baffling strangeness of watching him lose over and over without ever actually breaking. Other cadets started showing up to watch his trials, not to laugh anymore, but because there was something deeply unsettling about a creature that small refusing to be afraid of things that large. Zeal, cornered by a group of increasingly nervous alien cadets in the mess hall, ended up giving what amounted to an impromptu lecture on human psychology. "You do not understand," Zeal said, gesturing with 2 of its 4 arms. "For humans, humor is not weakness. It is armor. When threatened, damaged, or humiliated, the human response is often to make a joke, and this appears to somehow reduce the threat's effectiveness against them, psychologically if not physically. They also possess an extremely high threshold for what they consider acceptable risk, largely because their species has spent its entire history nearly going extinct and then deciding to do something monumentally stupid anyway." "That sounds like a design flaw," said a Critheri cadet. "It sounds," Zeal said slowly, "like something that should concern all of us significantly more than it currently does." Commander Vorik, however, remained unconvinced. If anything, the growing murmurs about the human cadet only annoyed him further. This was, in his mind, still just theater. Cheap tricks and mouthy defiance dressed up as resilience. He decided to end the conversation personally. He challenged Milo to a one-on-one exhibition match in the main arena, in front of the entire cadet class. Milo, to absolutely nobody's surprise, said yes, because turning down a fight would have required a level of self-preservation instinct he simply did not possess. The match, if you could call it that, was brutal. Vorik was faster, stronger, and had decades of combat experience Milo simply could not compete with. He hit Milo hard enough to crack a rib in the first exchange. Milo went down. The crowd winced. Milo got up. "Is that your best shot?" he wheezed, spitting blood onto the mat. "Because I've had worse hangovers." Vorik hit him again. Milo went down again, harder this time. Something in his shoulder made a sound nobody in the audience wanted to hear. Milo got up again. "You know," Milo said, swaying slightly, grinning through blood and sweat, my species used to fight things way bigger than us with sticks and mild overconfidence. You're doing great, by the way. Really. 10 out of 10 intimidation. I'm shaking. Can't you tell? This is me shaking. Vorik paused, fist raised, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, he genuinely hesitated. Not because the human posed any real physical threat, he clearly didn't, but because nothing about this exchange was making sense according to every rule of combat psychology Vorik had ever learned. Fear was supposed to compound. Pain was supposed to accumulate into surrender. This creature had neither the strength to win nor, apparently, the basic sense to know when he'd lost, and the not knowing was somehow worse than losing. The crowd had gone completely silent, and in that silence, several members of the audience realized they were watching Commander Vorik Thex, decorated Critheri warrior, look uncertain for the first time in his career, staring down at a bleeding human who simply refused to give him the reaction he wanted. Vorik lowered his fist. Enough, he said, and walked off the mat without finishing the match, which in the Academy's long history of exhibition fights had never happened before, not once. Milo, left standing alone and dripping blood onto the floor, turned to the stunned crowd and gave a small, exhausted bow. "I'll be here all week," he said. "Try the ramen." That was the moment, more than any other, when the rest of the Academy quietly started to understand that Milo Drager wasn't actually some strange outlier among humans. He was, according to Zeal's now rapidly expanding research log, disturbingly typical. Ambassador Rilquo Dunn, who had watched the entire exhibition from the diplomatic box with a growing sense of dread, reported back to their home government that evening with a message that was later, somewhat dramatically, quoted across several major species military channels. "They cannot be reliably intimidated," Rilquo wrote. "They do not appear to understand when a situation is hopeless, and this appears to make them substantially more dangerous, not less. Recommend further study before any future conflict scenario. Also recommend nobody try to threaten them while they are eating. This seems to make it worse." So, back to where we started. The Critheri warrior on the floor, groaning, and Milo standing over him with a drink pouch, looking distinctly unbothered. That fight, by the way, happened almost a full year after the exhibition match with Vorik, in a final year sparring session that Milo somehow, against every reasonable expectation including his own, actually won. Not through strength. Not through skill, exactly. Mostly through the simple fact that his opponent got so thoroughly rattled by Milo's non-stop commentary and refusal to acknowledge how badly outmatched he was that the poor guy tripped over his own feet trying to land a finishing blow. "You good down there, big guy?" Milo asked again, because apparently that had just become his signature line at this point. "Blink twice if you need a nap." The Critheri warrior blinked twice. Somewhere in the observation gallery, Vorik Thex watched this with his arms crossed and something that might have almost been the beginning of respect, buried very deep under several layers of professional Critheri stoicism. Zeal, seated beside him, was already writing in the log. "Subject remains fundamentally incomprehensible," Zeal muttered. "Recommend humanity be classified as a psychological hazard rather than a physical one." And that, if you're wondering, is basically how it went for the rest of the galaxy. Humanity never did become the strongest species at the Academy. They never got faster, or tougher, or scarier looking. What they got instead was a reputation, whispered nervously across a dozen species military briefings, that humans simply did not know when to be afraid, could not be reliably demoralized, and had an unsettling habit of making jokes directly into the face of their own destruction. Which, if you think about it, might honestly be worse. Somewhere out past the edge of known space, alien tacticians started adding a very specific, very unusual line to their combat training manuals: do not engage the small ones verbally. They will not stop talking. They will not stop getting up. And whatever you do, do not let them make eye contact while smiling. It never ends well for you.